Have you ever thought about the extreme punishments administered to the ancient Egyptians? Crimes were not lightly punished in ancient Egypt, and severe measures were frequently used to maintain order in the society. In this video, we'll explore some of the severe punishments given out to the rule breakers in ancient Egypt, so stay tuned. Murder was not a light subject in ancient Egypt. There are two categories of murder in ancient Egypt: intentional and unintentional. Intentional murders were considered as an offense of a serious nature, and punishment was severe in an effort to prevent others from doing the same act. Those who committed premeditated murder were punished mercilessly. In the case of a father murdering his children, he would be tied to the victim's body until it decomposed. When a son or daughter killed one of their parents, they would be burned alive. Grave thieves were also punished harshly by becoming a crocodile's prey or stabbed. Anyone who tried to conceal or hide information about a murder would receive the same punishment as the killer due to guilt by association. Unintentional manslaughter did not have a specific punishment in ancient Egypt, but the killer was expected to give sacrifices, seek retribution from the victim's family, and pay the proper restitution. If a person killed an animal with symbolic religious significance intentionally, they faced the ultimate punishment, execution. In ancient Egypt, adultery was considered a religious crime, and its punishment was severe. According to the teachings of Bazaar, men were warned not to be fascinated by women, as it could lead to their downfall. Adultery with a married woman was considered a crime, deserving of death, because the Egyptians believed it was easier to commit any other sin after committing adultery. They chose the most severe punishment possible. In order to stop the growth of immorality in society, if a married lady committed the crime, her husband had the legal authority to punish, pardon, or leave the matter up to the court. If the accused had no proof, the matter was taken as a marital dispute. While women were sentenced to death, men were only subjected to 1,000 blows. The punishment for a man involved in adultery was much lighter than the punishment for a woman. Ancient Egypt had severe punishments for stealing from the state. If one was found guilty of stealing public property, the penalty was close to 180 times the value of the stolen items and would be required to give back the stolen goods after confessing to the crime. And he would often get a public beating of 100 strokes by hand as punishment. In cases where the item that was stolen was unavailable, the guilty person would be tossed into the river and be torn apart by alligators. Grave robbing was punishable by death, since it was considered a crime against the state. In some situations, the punishment was reduced to the cutting off of hands or getting 100 blows if the mummy was left untouched. The punishment was 100 blows and 100 times the normal fine. Even judges who didn't deliver the desired verdict were not spared punishment. In one instance, the judge of the city of Ra got 100 strikes and was removed from his position and was assigned to work as a cultivation agent. The Egyptians believed that these punishments were meant to maintain order and prevent anyone from committing similar crimes in the future. While the punishments may seem extreme by modern standards, they played an important role in keeping up the civilization for many years. Bribery was seen as a betrayal of trust and integrity and was considered a crime in ancient Egypt. Bribery was a common issue that touched many sectors of the society, from the common man trying to avoid punishment for a minor offense, to the rich people seeking special favors or to evade punishment for their crimes. Bribery penalties were handled seriously. If government officials were detected taking bribes, they would be publicly humiliated and stripped of their rank and title, reducing them to the lowest status of a farmer, to send the message that bribery was not tolerated in Egypt. Another form of punishment was fines, where the size would depend on the seriousness of the offense and the wealth of the individual. Those who were not able to afford to pay the fine, they would be imprisoned instead. In more serious cases of bribery, death was the punishment. Although the method of execution varied, it frequently involved being beheaded or thrown into a pit of snakes. In ancient Egypt, criminals were not simply locked away. but instead, they were forced to work in the worst jobs imaginable. Many were enslaved and sent to the quarries to extract granite for the construction of the pyramids. Historians claim that skilled craftsmen actually did most of the work. However, criminals were greatly involved in this monumental task. They were assumed to be the workforce whose job was cutting millions of stone blocks out of the rock cliffs that were used in erecting the Great Pyramid of Giza. Prisoners were not allowed any free days and worked all year round in these dangerous and exhausting conditions. Other criminals were enslaved in farms as laborers and domestic servers, but the worst job was no doubt mining in the quarries. This job required a lot of manpower, plus a lot of effort, which usually resulted in serious injuries or even death. In ancient Egypt, the crime of treason was considered one of the most wicked and unforgivable offenses. The penalty for such a crime was straightforward, an absolute death. It didn't matter if you were high or low born, close to the king or far away from him. If you conspired against the kingdom, you were going down. The pharaoh wasn't the only target for treason. High-ranking officials, members of the royal family, and even common citizens could also fall victims. In the story of King Ramses III and his wife, T conspired to assassinate her own husband and have her son named as the next pharaoh. However, her plot was discovered, and she was executed along with her co-conspirators. Traitors were not only executed, but also weren't even given a decent burial. Their bodies were thrown into the river like garbage, denying them a final resting place. Thank you for joining us today.